This is a new guideline shift in Canada, and that's including physical activity, sedentary screen time, and sleep, all in one guideline for young children. So we're looking at the relationship between those three behaviors and early life mental health indicators.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Let's Move Canada. We're your hosts, Dana and Luigi from the Canadian Health and Fitness Institute. And on today's episode of Let's Move Canada, we will talk with the Child Health and Physical Activity Laboratory, Dr. Trish Tucker, about what inspires her and what being healthy means to her. Now, before I introduce Trish, let me start by saying that this podcast is brought to you by the Canadian Health and Fitness Institute, whose mission is to make Canada the fittest nation on earth by 2030. And to this end, of course, our podcast aims to raise awareness about physical and mental health. And now, let me introduce someone who is making big moves for our littlest Canadians. Meet Dr. Trish Tucker, a brilliant researcher, professor, and all-around champion for children's health and physical activity. Now, Trish is a professor at Western University and the director of the Child Health and Physical Activity Lab, where her work focuses on helping preschoolers move more, sit less, and build healthy habits from the start. She and her team are out there collaborating with childcare centers, educators, and families to create fun, realistic ways to get kids active, especially during those early and crucial years. Now, from turning playground time into powerful research to developing online tools for educators, Trish is making science feel like play, and we're totally here for it. She's been recognized across Canada for her work, but she'll tell you that her toughest and most joyful job is keeping up with her two young kids. So adorable. Trish, welcome. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and for the kind introduction.
Yeah,
Well,
we're so happy to have you here. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Little background and how you got involved in research in the first place.
Yeah, thanks. I'm from London, Ontario, in Canada, born and raised, and I did my degrees at Western, and really was an athlete my entire life. My father is a phys ed teacher. My sister and I both played basketball our entire lives, so we grew up very much in the sport world, the activity world. And so when I went on to do my undergrad, I was focusing on health sciences and just really knew for sure I wanted to do something with kids because that's always been a passion for me. But then also wanted to bridge my enjoyment of sport and exercise with that passion for improving the lives of kids. So that's really how this research came to be and how I stumbled into this position. Wasn't really the plan to be a researcher. That wasn't like a lifetime goal of mine or anything like that, but here I am.
oh, I'm so excited. So, first of all, what was the original plan, and what got you into it? Well, what inspired the pivoting?
Yeah, so I thought I was going to be a gym teacher, which is what my dad was and what my sister now is. And I think I could have been okay at it, but I got into my master's and actually really just fell in love with the research, which is so ironic because as an undergrad, I thought I will never do any job that requires statistics. But here I am many years later, on occasion, running some stats. So it wasn't the plan, but I just really enjoyed the research, enjoyed the opportunity to try and understand behavior and nuances, and then also feel like I could do something about it to try and make a change and try and make improvements for children's health and well-being.
Got it, got it. And I know you said that you like working with kids, but was there a single moment where you realized, oh my gosh, kids is it? I mean, I studied exercise and health science for my undergrad, and I remember taking a course on the elderly, and I thought, you know what, this is actually really interesting. It talks
Mhm.
about all of these uh different things about things that get inflamed and how an inflammatory system can kind of just lead to aging and everything. And I thought this might be something I go into, and lo and behold, I'm kind of here doing this, right? So was there a single moment for you where you realized kids, working with kids is really where I want to go?
I don't know if there was a single moment per se, but I just have always, like my parents would tell you, I used to love to babysit. I used to love to just interact with children. So it was just kind of, I always felt like my calling, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think what, the impetus for why I focused my research there was I was trained in health promotion. And so I very much believe that why not prevent ill health if we can.
Mhm.
And so why not start with our, our little children, the littlest Canadians, if you will, to try and make important health gains and set them up on a trajectory for long-term health and well-being.
Beautiful.
So tell us a little bit about the research. Like what actually are you researching and yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah, so in the Child Health and Physical Activity Lab, we focus very much on the early years, so kids under 5, although not exclusively, that's where the most of our research happens.
Very
And
young, very young children.
very young children, infants, toddlers, preschoolers, so like the littlest people you can think of, like infants,
Oh, God, it
movement
sounds so
laying on their
cute though.
tummy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
So
So
cute.
it's so fun. Like the job is very, very rewarding. It certainly has its challenges working with preschoolers and young children, but it's super rewarding. So some of the research that we have on the go in the lab is we have a few studies actually. One is called Sunrise, and it's an international study actually. So Canada is one of over 65 countries across the world that's participating. And the goal of Sunrise is actually to look at how preschoolers are doing relative to the World Health Organization's guidelines for physical activity. And so my lab in London is actually acting as one of the Canadian sites. So we're collecting data on different physical attributes like running, jumping, that sort of stuff, and then some cognitive outcomes, and then children wear an accelerometer, which is how we measure physical activity in our lab. So an accelerometer is just like a high-tech pedometer, basically, that kids
Mhm.
can wear on a little belt around their waist, and we usually have them wear it for 7 days, and it gives us every ebb and flow of their movement for the entire 7 days, and we can really dissect it and look at when they're active and when they're not, and when they're sleeping and when they're not, and that sort of thing. So that's one study that we're doing right now. Another study we're doing is called the mobility study. So we're trying to look at in this study the relationship between 24-hour movement behavior. So this is a new guideline shift in Canada, and that's including physical activity, sedentary screen time, and sleep, all in one guideline for young children. So we're looking at the relationship between those three behaviors and early life mental health indicators for young children. So that's another study we're doing. And then on top of that, we're also doing our TEACH study, which is really designed to provide knowledge and confidence to early childhood educators around what is appropriate physical activity, how to implement physical activity in childcare centers, how to be creative about doing that on a rainy day, for example, or days when you can't get kids outside. So just really trying to support educators to feel like they have the knowledge to do the job that they're expected to do, but oftentimes aren't trained to do.
very, very cool. I mean, this is very much I would love to know the result of these studies. I mean, if we're trying to make Canada the fittest nation on earth by 2030, Dana, we're just gonna have to wait for all of these results to come out on top of what's already out there, right? So what are some maybe important issues that you think children are currently facing when it comes to physical health?
Yeah. So I think, one thing we see is that most kids in the early years are not meeting the 24-hour movement guidelines in combination. So that's the physical activity, the screen time, and sleep in combination. Most kids of this age are getting enough sleep. I think that's a priority for a lot of parents.
Right.
But oftentimes not the screen time or not the physical activity or some combination thereof. So, there's certainly lots of room for improvement in that regard. No denying screens are pervasive in children's lives. And so that's a really tough one for us to tackle because they're not going away. And so we have to think about the messaging that we're providing to try and maybe use screens for, educational purposes in lieu of just babysitting purposes, things like that. So that's definitely a big challenge is how screens have, invaded children's lives. I know, I think another challenge is social media, not obviously for preschoolers, but I have children, it's pervasive and what kids are exposed to is very different than how I grew up. Uh,
Oh, me too. Oh yeah. I it's
I know I'm older, but
no, I mean I see it's so crazy because they actually like do a lot of work on their like iPads or phones or whatever too, right? In school.
Required.
When I was a kid, we'd like hang out and like go to the park and run around or whatever, right? And then I
yeah,
see kids today that are like literally hanging out with each other from
Right.
their own houses on their iPad in a chat
yeah,
room together.
yeah. It's a
It's
different time.
worldwide.
It's
Yeah.
a
Oh
different,
yeah.
when I wanted to go play with a friend, I just went and knocked on their door. Whereas now it's like, can you come out and play? Oh, you can't. I'm just not going to leave my house then, right?
Right.
Like it's a
Right.
different time and how
Right.
kids communicate is different and how they interact is different. And that's
Mhm.
for sure having an influence on their movement behaviors. So that's another big challenge for, older kids, obviously, but just how children are growing up has changed.
What's
How
the
active kids are in active transportation as well.
right,
Mhm.
right. So like what would be the guideline for like say a toddler? So or like 3-year-old, take a 3-year-old. How much
Yeah.
physical activity should that 3-year-old actually be getting?
So 3-year-old should get 180 minutes, 3 hours of physical activity every day. And within that 3 hours,
Whoa.
60 minutes should be
Okay.
moderate to vigorous intensity. So 1 hour of that like heart pumping,
Mhm.
heavy breathing type exercise, and then 2 other hours of like walking around and, moving, but not like sweating heavily, that sort of thing.
Okay, I would not have Luigi, would you have guessed that?
I remember studying something like that in when I was studying in my undergrad. And the question that I always thought about was, is recess ever enough? As a kid, I remember recess could always be longer.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
Trish, can recess be longer? Should recess
I
be
would say
longer?
yes.
Yeah,
I would say yes. I don't know if everyone would agree with me. My kids would say yes. Um,
I would. Yeah.
but I think, when we think about the older kids, phys ed is not what it used to be. My kids have phys ed twice a week. When I went to school, we
Oh,
had a
every
5 day.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not anymore. And so there's just been a shift in,
Huh.
academic priorities as well, or what maybe it's a resource issue. I don't know, both at the teacher or the gym availability, but there's
Yeah.
been a shift in the schools as well that innately is impacting opportunities for movement over the course of the day.
Oh, wow.
So how much are they actually on average getting like a 3-year-old right now in Canada?
So lots of kids do meet that actually. For many kids, it's more the screen time. But when they shift into the 5-year-old age group, that's when they expect 60 minutes of what we call moderate to vigorous physical activity. So like heart pounding, sweaty, heavy breathing kind of exercise that you
Going
or
around
I
the
would
gym
do.
and playing a game. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then we see the levels drop quite a bit.
Wow.
So when we get into the higher intensity stuff, we see the rates are quite a bit lower.
Mm.
And I wonder, would there ever be recommendations to perhaps include play in the school system? So think of like our regular PE courses right now for student ages 5 and under. Um, will there be a day perhaps when we think about reforming a little bit of that education system where maybe that intense physical activity play is included as part of that curriculum? Maybe that would be helpful.
I think it would be great. I mean, I think it would for sure be a dream, maybe at this moment in time, but I think it would be wonderful, thinking about could we have phys ed specialists, as in teachers who are
Right.
trained to run phys ed for children, uh,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, rather than generalist teachers, and not because generalist teachers aren't wonderful, but because, having specialized training will at least allow you to be providing really good quality phys ed. That is one avenue. Having it, like you said, programmed into the daily curriculum would be wonderful. The province of Ontario did try that with quality daily physical activity, QDPA.
Okay.
It was probably 10 years ago now, actually. And so the intention was for children to get movement built into their non-phys ed days. So on days you don't have phys ed, during math class, we're going to stand up and do 10 minutes of jumping jacks or
Right.
whatever their idea was. And it really hasn't sustained. It hasn't been that successful. The buy-in has been low and the follow-through has been poor. So, I think there's good intentions. It's a true overhaul to the education system to put this
Yeah.
back at the priority and back at the forefront.
Okay, I'm actually still really shocked that there's only phys ed a couple times a week. Like that is nothing, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it probably differs by school board to some degree, I'm
Yeah.
sure, and by province because education is managed and regulated at the provincial level. So that might differ across provinces and territories. But I know, like for my kids, for example, and having spoken to lots of other people, in Ontario, it's not that unusual.
Wow. I wonder, so do you know what the reason is for that?
I think it's probably a combination of things. I do think there's a resource issue from a gym space perspective, but I also think it's a revisit to the academic priorities.
Mm, hmm. Right.
It might be that. No, it's so interesting because okay, so my high school years were in the US, right? And I do recall us having physical education either every other day. And as you get older, for the first semester, for the first half of the year, you may have gym, and then the second half, maybe you don't have gym, right? Or
Yeah.
physical activity. So sometimes Dana, it even actually gets to not having it at all,
Really?
right? unless you're in a team sport,
Yeah.
whether it's soccer, football, cheerleading, etc. Um, yeah, now that I think of it, um, it was every other day. And
Yeah.
so three times the two to three times a week, you have gym. So
Hmm.
yeah, so it seems like it's something that's been around for
In a
quite some.
while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
a while. It's been a little while.
And
So,
we, oh,
how,
sorry, Dana.
no, I was going to ask, like, how many years have you been researching this?
So I don't specialize in the school system. I specialize more in childcare centers and that sort of thing, but I've been
Yeah.
working in the physical activity space for about 15 years now.
So
Oh,
have you seen in your research at Childlab, um, the rates go down? Are they going down? Are they staying the same, or what's happening?
They're not high, and we haven't seen a huge decline. We did see a bit of a dip during COVID-19 pandemic, but we haven't seen a huge resurgence after. But they were
okay.
never like, really stellar to begin with. So while they aren't declining dramatically, they aren't getting
It's
any
not
better.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
13% of preschoolers meet the 24-hour movement guidelines in their entirety. So that's physical activity, screen time, and sleep in combination.
Right.
So, yeah.
So now I'm curious. What are some realistic recommendations that you could see? I mean, I know we talked about, the school system, but as you mentioned, that's a little bit of an overall. What is something realistic that you could recommend right now
Yeah, I
based
think
on research?
Yeah, so I think the research is really evolving in the early years. I think it's a space that's been um, exponentially growing in the last 10 years. When I started in this space, there was basically not many people anyway. I don't want to say no one else, but very few people working in the earlier space about 15 years ago. So we've seen lots of growth in research, which is wonderful. And the evidence is building as a consequence. So these new 24-hour movement guidelines do provide us with the best available guidance and recommendations for what appropriate behaviors are for this age group. And so right now that recommendation, like I said, is 3 hours of physical activity. It's no more than 2 hours of screen time, 1 hour for preschoolers, 2 hours for five and above. And then the sleep range is independent for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, but for preschoolers, it's about 9 to 11 hours. So this is the best available evidence we have. And public health guidelines are updated on a cyclical basis. So, I do know the Canadian guidelines are currently under review and will be probably re-released in the next few years now that we do have a little bit more evidence than we did last time. But that's kind of the best evidence we have to say you will achieve the best health outcomes at this intensity level.
Hmm. Yeah. So what advice would you give to parents that are like trying to get their kids to meet these guidelines that you're talking about?
I would start by saying I'm a parent too, and I know how hard it is. So preface with that. But I think it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be organized. It can be, but it doesn't have to be any of those things. And I think that's an important thing to remember because oftentimes when we think of physical activity for our kids, we think of hockey and gymnastics and things that can be expensive sports, and it doesn't have to be that. Simple things like getting the kids outside, buying them some chalk and having them draw on the road, having them take the dog for a walk. If there's another child in the neighborhood, arranging play dates outside for them. It doesn't have to be complicated. Usually kids, as soon as they go outside, move their bodies more. The research suggests in childcare centers anyway, kids are 10 times more active outside than inside.
10
So
times more?
10 times.
Wow.
So just simply getting them out the door is probably going to be the biggest challenge. And once they're out, they usually find something to do to keep themselves busy.
That's great advice.
And so I'm also curious, with going back to your research a little bit, is there a component that talks about mental health and emotional health as it's tied to physical activity for these children?
Yeah, so we're actually just conducting a study right now, our mobility study, looking at some of these indicators. So we'll be looking at, we're just in the data collection phase. So if you know any 2 to 4 year olds, let me know. But we are just recruiting and collecting our baseline data now. And so we don't have results for it yet, but our goal is to look at the relationship between these 24-hour movement behaviors. So looking at physical activity, screen time, and sleep, both in combination, but also independently and some early life mental health indicators, including self-regulation, including rates of tantrums, things like things like that. So
Mhm.
our goal is to have some of those data this time next year. But just generally speaking from the literature, we know that kids who are more active have better self-regulation. Kids who are more active have better academic outcomes. So we anticipate some very similar findings in these Canadian data, but that's kind of where we're at in our current project.
And are these resources available to parents, available to anyone at any time that they want to?
The studies, sorry, is that what you
Well,
mean?
yeah,
Or
just like information that they can maybe take from the research you're doing.
yeah, so we're in my lab, we do take a lot of time and energy to try and translate our research because, in my opinion, research on a shelf is useless. And so we really try to make sure that what we're doing, we get out there to parents, to families, to educators, to physicians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on our website, there's lots of infographics which share, kind of the take-home messages of individual research studies. We have lots of videos on there that talk about some of the findings in a, perhaps more consumable, more interesting manner. We have lots of statistics on that website as well. And then we have a YouTube channel as well where we
Oh,
also
cool.
provide some additional information and, ideas of like, here's a simple way for you to get your kid active. So we're really trying to provide some outreach to be able to provide some of these resources to parents and to educators.
Mhm. Very
And,
cool.
and and for anyone interested, the website is childpalab.ca. So childpalab.ca. It is the cutest website. Like I'm looking at it. It's just I'm a sucker for websites that have little cartoons and plays great with colors, and it's still simple and inviting. So go check out the website. They have information on current studies, completed studies, etc. So pretty much everything that you've talked about.
Thanks for the plug, Luigi.
Of course, of course. And I think there's one more big question, maybe a few follow-up questions after that we may have, but what is something that Canada should focus on more when it comes to physical activity and health, and maybe in particular for children?
Yeah. I think one of our big challenges is supportive environments. We are, as we've been talking about, we're kids are growing up in a different world, and that's, in both the social realm, the digital realm, but also just the physical realm. Kids don't walk to school anymore. Kids don't, go to the park and play the way that they used to. And so we need to revisit supportive environments and also safe environments for kids to go and have access to. So I think, that's one priority. I also think per our conversation, and this is, a lot of the work that we do in the childcare space is physical activity policy and curriculum has huge potential. We know that, more than 60% of preschoolers attend childcare in Canada and they spend 35 plus hours there a week. So in many cases, that's more than they see,
Oh,
their
yeah.
parents
A lot.
on a weekday,
Mhm.
right? And so there's so much potential there to try and create environments for kids that are supportive. And that can be done both, from the physical environment, the playground that they have, the space that they have, the toys they have, but it can also be done by physical activity policy because childcare is regulated provincially and territorially. There's discrepancies across the country around how much time kids get to be active or how much time kids get to play outside. And so that's one simple fix or simple win, if you will, to try and provide some consistency in the affordances that children are provided with respect to physical activity. So I think that's another avenue that Canada could definitely spend some time and energy.
I've noticed that kids aren't walking to school as much. What is that? Why is that?
Oh, I think it's probably lots of things. I mean, as a parent, I think that to myself when I drive my kids to school in the morning. Like it's just the ease of, right, like drop you off and I carry on to work and then they walk home. And
Yeah.
I think there's certainly some convenience to that. I also think it's probably a stranger danger thing that we do definitely have some concerns about the safety of our children
Mhm.
that maybe we didn't have a few
My
decades ago.
parents were like, "Oh, you're 7 years old. You can get to school, even though it's a million
Absolutely.
blocks away." Like that was not a thing.
I went out after school and I'd get called at 8 p.m. 4 hours later when it was time to come in, right? And they didn't
Right.
know as they just stood at the door and yelled from the porch. It's a different time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely
absolutely.
different time. But yeah, it does make it more like you have to kind of actually plan out being active, right? You actually have to like make an effort to like, okay, I'm gonna go outside today, or I'm gonna get off my phone, or I'm gonna get off my laptop, stop playing this game. There are so many games on that you could literally sit there all day, all weekend and just play these games, right, for kids and stuff. But to like actually put it down and like go outside, where when I was growing up, you never thought about that. You don't want to sit in the house all day, right? You're bored. So you
Yeah.
go outside, you
So
do things. you really got to be intentional about it
You
now,
do.
which is difficult when you're busy and you're
Yeah.
overwhelmed and you got house chores and you got this and dinner and it's like, right?
It is. There's so many demands on parents. And so that's why I'm always quick to say, like, I'm one too. I totally understand.
Mhm.
And if we can provide them with those opportunities, I mean, there's huge benefits for them. Or and even better, like be active with them, right? Like because one, we're a role model and they're watching what we do. And two, it's healthy for us to be
Totally.
moving our bodies as well. So,
Right.
as time allows, get out there and be active with your kids because it's going to be more fun for them. But also it's got lots of health benefits for both of you.
Right. Yeah.
Really, really good message. Last thing, this has me thinking about nutrition. I my one of my first cousins has 4 kids, and we're just a few years apart, and I'm thinking, wow, he has 4 kids and I don't have any kids. He's kind of like a hero to me, right? And just seeing him manage everything with his wife. And one of the things that he always says is after play, kids always get a snack. So I'm curious to know if in your studies that's something that you track as well, like how nutrition impacts kids' physical activity levels. Like is it one of these things like kids have so much energy that they just play and then whenever they get a snack, they get a snack? Or should that be part of the plan? You give them a snack, let them play, come back, dinner and everything.
So it's not something that we do a lot of work in the nutrition space, but I think it's important for kids to fuel their bodies. And so, I think if the kids need fuel based on the movement behaviors that they're engaging in, I think it's appropriate to fuel them with some healthy options.
Well, I think with that, I think we've just had such a great podcast where we've learned a lot about the work that you do and that you've done and that you continue to do. So thank you so much for coming on our podcast and not only sharing your journey, but some really wise methods that parents can use to keep their children active. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you both so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm gonna stay checking up on that research because I mean I'm trying to have a family right now too. So I'm like very, very interested in like toddler, that age and like how important physical activity is and everything. So I'll be sure to follow what you're doing.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, please reach out when you've got some little ones if you want them in the studies.
Oh, most
It's kind of fun
definitely.
to see all their little like movement and that sort of thing. So it's pretty fun.
You know what? We'll probably reach out even sooner because again, we're trying to make Canada the fittest nation on earth, and we're just gonna do it one person at a time as much as we can.
Sounds great. I'm here for it.
Beautiful, beautiful. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everyone who tuned into this episode. Again, we're your hosts, Dana and Luigi. And if you want to learn more about Trish and the great work that she's doing, feel free to follow her on Instagram at ChildPA Labs for a lot of information, tips and tricks, and just the latest news on the studies that she's leading with her team. In addition, make sure to check our Instagram at Let's Move Canada for latest updates and head over to our website at chfi.fit to learn more about our mission. Don't hesitate to DM us if you have any ideas that you kind of want to share with us, or if you want to be a guest on Let's Move Canada, we are for it. So stay tuned until next episode, and thank you so much. Take care.